Hello again and welcome back after our final break for today's agenda. So we now go international and I'm delighted to welcome David all the way from the UK. So thank you very much, David, for joining us in what is a bit of an early start for you, but we certainly appreciate it. I will now hand over to ACNC Commissioner Sue Woodward AM, who will introduce David. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, fantastic to be here.
Thanks, Mel. And David and I have had a couple of chats. I mean, the way the system works is it's either, I think I had one quite late on a Friday night, and that was early for David, and the other time it was early for me and late for David. And I was trying to work out what the temperature difference might be, because I thought perhaps at the moment I'm enjoying a beautiful sunny 22 degrees at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I'm not quite sure what it is like for you, but we won't get it all competitive about weather. And thank you to you, the audience, for hanging into the last session, because I think this is probably going to be the fireside chat that you most want to hear from, because David is the new CEO of the England and Wales Charity Commission, and many of you will know that is the oldest specialist charity regulator that we have, even though he's still perhaps the new kid on the block. Having said that, David, who was appointed in February, does have a very long wealth of regulatory experience. I was interested to read that you most recently had been the regulator for animal and plant health. You've been the Deputy CEO of the UK Intellectual Property Office. You've also worked previously in the Home Office in several roles. You've had amazing experience in the private sector for two different FTSE 100 companies. You're a fellow of the Institute of Directors, and you're currently a non-remunerated board trustee of the Council of Deans of Health in the UK, which is an interesting position. So a range of roles, and interestingly, from my perspective, similar to my background, David was also previously the Deputy CEO and Registrar at the Charities Commission in the UK. So we've shared the story that we both were there in certain roles, like I was at the ACNC earlier, and then I've come back, and David has followed a similar path. And I'm quite pleased to have David as the new kid on the block, because it makes me feel like perhaps I'm not quite as new, but we both have had that experience of returning to an organisation that we've been involved in. So I might actually just sort of jump right in there, David, with that as the sort of starting point, is that you were at the Charities Commission, I think it was 2015 to 2019. And I just think if you could tell us, what drew you back to coming back to this role?
I think it's the only organisation and the only role that could have tempted me out of the role I was in as CEO of the Animal Plant Health Agency. And I think it's the mission. It's the importance of charities to the nation, the importance of what they do to communities, and what they do to drive society forward and together rather than apart. And I think in today's world of increased polarization, for the first time in a generation in Europe, we've seen war on the continent, which my generation has not experienced. That the role of charities is just ever more important. So that ability to come back to help with that mission, to help charities achieve their potential, has just been fantastic for me. So I'm absolutely delighted to be back. And the people at the Charity Commission in England and Wales are amazing. They are world-class experts. And so getting to work with them again is just fantastic.
I do think I share with you that when you come and you find that sweet spot of what we are also passionate about, and you can use your skills to make a difference, and then you have a great team around you, that's a very professionally happy sweet spot, is what I would suggest. And since you've been back, what changes have you noticed? Like when I came back, I noticed that they still had staff meetings on the same day of the week. But, you might have noticed much more profound changes in the time that you've been away.
So there's been a new Charities Act in England and Wales since I was last here. So there's been a new charities bill that's gone through Parliament, which gave different powers to the Commission, but also empowered charities more in some of those areas. So I've seen a change in the legislative state. There's a lot of new faces, which is good. So it's always good in a regulator when you attract people to join the organisation. And the Commission's gone through a period of growth as we've seen the sector grow, as we've seen the sector perhaps become a bit more complex, as on the back of the financial crash in 2008, what we did see was the sector rolling forward for the first time in the UK in generations, where the state was rolling back from service provision. And so actually charities became a bit more complex. And returning, some of that change is still there. The complexity of how charities have structured themselves, the complexity of some of the services that they deliver, and the risks and the increased risks that that brings with it in operating terms, that they've been some of the changes. But I think technology as well, it's been great to see the journey I started on with the Commission in digitising, in automating, in moving to a self-serve model where trustees are able to do a lot more for themselves just by using our online services. It's been great to see that continue, because when I first arrived in the Commission, believe it or not, I did have to physically sign some registration certificates in my first period. And you think, you know, now we're using technology to take away some of that so we can focus on some of the really important work that we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ACNC very much benefited from the lessons from England and Wales, in that we did set up as a digital by default agency. And, you know, that was part of the legacy that we could get from learning and springboarding off what we could see as your experience. So some of those observations you've made really ring true. Is there, you know, it's very early on, but people always ask you when you join an agency and when you're the chief executive officer of, you know, are there particular things that you've already worked out that you want to focus on, or ideas that you want to explore in particular?
So I think for me, one of the things I don't think we managed to do last time I was here was raise the visibility of just the scale of what the sector does. And there are a lot of services provided in the UK that a lot of the general public assume is the state. So we have air ambulances. Well, all of them are charities. None of them are state operated, state owned. So our air ambulance service is a charity. Our lifeboat service across the coast is a charity. It's not state funded. It's provided, operated by a charity. And so for me, one of the things I want to do is raise the visibility of the scale, the impact, and the importance of the sector right throughout every community. And again, so the sector can have a bigger voice in some of the decision making, in some of the policy setting, because they are on the front line. They know their communities, they know the challenges, but they also know the solutions because they're providing them day in, day out. So raising that visibility for me and giving charity a bigger voice within government, within political decision making for me is one of the areas I would like to improve on.
Do you have data that you share back in that way in terms of making the contribution that, as you say, that it often can be a bit hidden, speak for itself?
Yeah, exactly. And again, that comes back to better use of our data and technology, and some of the journey the Commission's been on in unlocking our data, because we have a wealth of data, but the accessibility of it, the ability for others to access it and use for research, etc., until fairly recently has been quite limited. So some of it can be done working in partnership with academic institutions. Some of it is working with, you know, fellow civil service colleagues in other parts of government and working on solutions. And again, we've shown when it works and when we do provide the bridge. It's not for us to speak for charities, but it is for us to provide that visibility, to provide the bridge with government where it's needed. And we've seen in the past where we do that, it can work well and it can transform how government delivers, but also how the sector delivers. And learning from the post-2017 terror attacks, we did set up the National Emergency Trust, which transformed how, on the back of a national emergency, funds could be raised and quickly distributed throughout the nation, and the public had somewhere they trusted to be able to donate. So we've seen how that providing a bridge, providing that join up can really make a difference.
Yeah, I think again we've learned from you in that regard, and I think one of the key roles that I've been reminded of when I've come back to this role is that it's a constant thing. People in government change, departments get changed around when governments change. So constantly making sure that policymakers understand how important, big, and what the contribution of the sector is, and sometimes the unintended consequences of policies that they might be working on can have for a sector that is purpose-driven rather than shareholder-driven, for example. So I think that's quite a similar observation that I would say is something that's not always that tangible for the sector, but I hope that we're probably both very committed to. In terms of your pure role as the regulator, how do you navigate that? Or are there any early observations that you want to draw out of things that have changed in that role, or you think a core and will always be the case?
So I think in terms of our role as a regulator, what we are seeing more of, which we did see in my day, but we are seeing more of, is some of the challenges around discourse within different parts of the sector. And, charities are not immune from the wider societal trends of kind of polarization, and the kind of ability to have a conversation, to debate, to discuss, is more challenging in the current environment, and charities aren't immune from that. And as the regulator, one of the things I think Helen did as my predecessor, and I'm determined to do, is make sure we're not weaponized in that debate, and we're not drawn in to take sides on one side or another. We are a quasi-judicial regulator. We are a law-based regulator, and it's really important for public trust and confidence, and for the trust in the sector, that it is the law that we regulate against. We're not a moral regulator. We're not an ideas regulator. We are a law-based regulator. And it's really, really important that people feel that confidence that we will regulate to the law.
Yeah, and obviously there's many sensitive issues navigating at the moment that I think as international regulators we are navigating. We've got charities that are working in conflict zones. There's a lot of, I was particularly going to mention, obviously, the statement that you've just put out in response to the riots and public disorder. I mean, people might not know about that. Could you tell us a bit more about that statement and what prompted you to make it and what you've said in that statement? He's just dropped out for a minute, so I'll let him come back. But if you haven't seen it, it's on their website, and I think if you've been watching the media in the UK, what's happening overseas, and picking up from David's point about how some charities are being weaponised, I think it is quite an interesting approach that as a regulator they've taken. So I'm keen to ask him about that. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes in the hope that the magic of here we go. That's Mel.
I'm not the David that you were hoping for, Sue, but I am here. I just think Marty's on to the case to sort David out. I just think it's worth reminding everyone about the communications that the ACNC focus on. Obviously, you have a monthly e-newsletter that comes out from the ACNC, which is full of news and updates and important news that you want to share with charities and those who are responsible for governing charities. I wondered whether there was anything that you wanted to highlight from current communications or anything that you wanted to use this opportunity to really underline the importance.
Well, I hope it is a useful thing for people. I am encouraged that the readership's gone up. I don't know if I can take credit for that, but if people have particular topics that they think would be of interest to a broader part of the sector, certainly drop us a line at the media team or me. That's something that we can address. So, David, we're very pleased that you're back. We have been filling with our own self-promotion in the meantime because, you know, never let a good opportunity go by. And Mal will come back and if we have any questions later. But what I was saying was, if you didn't manage to hear it all, the question was really around, I noticed you put out a statement in response to the riots and public disorder, and not everyone on this will know about that or have read it. I just thought it might be really interesting for you to explain why you made that decision as a regulator to do that, and possibly the gist of what you've said in that statement.
Yeah, sure. It's been a really challenging time for communities in the UK, and what we saw happening was a terrible incident close to where I live, literally a 15-minute drive down the road in Southport, with the tragic murder of 3 young girls. And that was used by far-right extremists to stir up anti-immigration, anti-refugee, Islamophobic hate. And what we saw for the first time ever was charities were actually targeted by the rioters, by the far right. So we saw mosques targeted, we saw refugee and asylum centres targeted. So as the regulator, I did reach out to sector leaders, and what I was hearing was the sector were actually quite concerned that they didn't know whether they should stay open. They didn't know how the regulator viewed the risks they would be taking in opening a centre if someone was hurt. So I put the statement out for 2 reasons. One, I thought it was important that the sector understood we as the regulator were there alongside them, and we supported the work that they did. That as a public leader, I put out there that, you know, our society, there should be no place for racism. There should be no place for Islamophobia. We have moved on a huge amount as a society, and it was really important that those of us who had a voice in public use that voice to call out the shameful acts that we did see, and let those who were fearful, you know, I have staff of colour, I have staff from ethnic minorities, that they were scared to leave the house at points, and it was really important they knew they were not alone, and that there were those of us who perhaps weren't facing the direct fear and challenge they were facing, who stood alongside them and said, this is not right, not in our name, and as the regulator, we've got your back.
Have you had much response to it?
Yeah, it's actually been really good, because again, what we've been able to do is work with some organisations who had paused their services. And again, these are in the very communities that have been impacted, and the very communities where some of the disturbances are. And at the same time, during school summer holidays, services were being closed down for young people in those areas. So again, we were able to work with some of those organisations to reopen those services, to provide links with local authorities and police forces so they could get some of that reassurance. And again, the Home Office opened a scheme which allowed access to funds for those charities and premises that could be targeted to access funds to improve security and access so they could operate safely. And I still find it mind-blowing in this day and age that that's what we had to do. But the response from the sector has been fantastic. They've already swung into action, as they always do. They're on the front line in these communities. And what we did see, and I don't know if you saw it over the last weekend, there were mass demonstrations against racism, and so again, what you did see in what was a pretty dark period, the light was turned back on, and that was by charities and communities coming together and saying, no, we're not going back there, no, not in our name, and no, this is not acceptable. And I loved on the news footage, there was a protest in Brighton in the south of England, and there were 8,000 anti-racism protesters, and only 8 far right turned up, and they were hugely outnumbered. The anti-racist, anti-Islamophobic protesters were peaceful, they were calm, but they did let it be known to the 8 that turned up, you're outnumbered and not in our community. And I thought that was fantastic.
Well, I think, again, that's a demonstration of, as a regulator, you've managed to link to other parts of government as well. So you've managed to get those supports in. You've managed, if you're a trustee, in our world, we would say, you're on the governing body of a charity and you're trying to balance that risk of harm to staff and your legal obligations, under work health and safety, and you're personally liable for these things, and yet you want to continue services. How do you do that, and what is the right risk approach? And I think your statement has obviously provided them some guidance at that crucial time. So I thought that was very interesting. Are there any other things that you wanted to sort of highlight that are coming up, maybe in terms of education and guidance? I know you've had modules that are like quick quizzes and things like that have we watch with interest, and we're learning from. We've done some changes have changes underfoot to our education materials to provide them in a different range of formats, the short, the medium and the bigger chunks. Are there any other things that perhaps people on this call would be interested to know, what other international practice is happening?
Yeah, so we've been working with the banking sector. So I'm not sure about Australia, but in the UK, there's been some unintended consequences around the international treaty, the Financial Action Task Force from the UN on anti-money laundering practices. What that's meant is quite a lot of our international charities or charities that work outside of the UK have found it quite difficult to either access banking services or have had banking services removed. So we've worked with the banking sector, with the financial regulator, to work on guidance both for banks, because it's not all about the charity sector, but also for charities to help them navigate how they need to ensure they're compliant, how they evidence compliance to banks so they don't get caught in that regulatory and risk kind of category. So that's one of the areas we've focused on. We are seeing some challenges on the back of the pandemic, on the back of the cost of living crisis. We are seeing some of our larger organisations and some pretty old organisations that have provided services for generations in the UK face significant financial challenges. And one that has been in the news is Leonard Cheshire, and it provides housing for vulnerable people, has been around for many, many years. And because of the cost of living crisis, because of the pandemic, faced significant financial challenges. And again, as the regulator, helping trustees navigate that, providing some guidance and advice on their decision making whilst letting them make the decisions and get some professional advice. Again, we've been ensuring that advice is readily available and encouraging charities come to us early. If you come to us early as the regulator, we can provide advice before actually it becomes a massive problem. So the key message we're trying to get out there to the sector is come talk to us early. When you notice a problem, when you notice an issue, the earlier you speak to us, the more we can help.
Thank you. I thought we might finish with a few facts and figures. So just so other people know, how many staff do you have?
426.
How many charities do you regulate?
So we have 426 staff. We're regulating just under 170,000 charities. And the sector income is now at 94 billion UK pound a year. And charities in England and Wales are holding assets of just under 250 billion UK pounds. So it's a huge sector, it's very diverse, and it has a massive impact. And I couldn't be prouder of the small number of staff we have and the impact they make.
Last question that I ask all staff when they come to the ACNC and we have a one-on-one mini fireside chat. Of course, in no building would we have an actual fire. Animals, given you were involved in the animal and plant regulator, you cats and dogs, Budgie,
definitely, definitely dogs.
Definitely dogs.
So
okay.
we have a delightful Pomeranian called Nova.
Nova. Okay, well, I'm going to perhaps finish on that note, unless there's anything else you wanted to say while you had the floor, but I think it's been very, very generous of you to come to our session, and I know that we're going to be meeting later in the year. David and I find it really helpful when we talk to our international colleagues, because there's not that many people who regulate charities in the world. So it is always really helpful. And I know that there's been a long-standing relationship between our organisations. And I'm very thrilled that you've in the role and the conversations we've already had. And I know that we'll learn from each other as we both stay in our roles for a time to go. So I might finish on that note and let Mel take it over from here. So thank you again, David.
Thanks very much, Sue. And to all the charities in the audience, I would say, don't underestimate the impact you have. And when it's tough, don't underestimate the positive impact you have on all of your communities. You know, I know it's the same in Australia. You are the backbone and the golden thread throughout all Australian communities. So keep going, be proud of what you do, and thanks for all that you do as well.
Wonderful. What a way to end. Thank you, David. That was excellent. And thank you very much, Sue. That was really, really insightful. And I'm sure that the perspectives that you covered will be reflected upon by everyone today.